I am such a freaking keener.
What do you mean?
Like a first to arrive. Look at me showing up early. Well, as I like to say, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late.
Yeah, like something Jocko would say. Hey, I'm going to. You got to bounce early, right?
I don't have to bounce early today now.
Oh, okay. I thought. Oh, it was Jed. Said later. Let me give you
The keys?
the speaking horn. So I can figure out how to do that on my phone. I just arrived at where I just have a workshop that starts at damn it, how do you do this? At 10. And they gave me a room that I can do this from. Do this. So I'm no.
Yeah, if you want to hand me over the
inside.
keys while you do stuff, I'll just hang out and wait for people to pile in. Let
Yeah,
you
I
get
can't see
settled.
where I can't see where the fuck it goes. Where do you
Hang on a second. Let's see if I can. Can I request? Can I request host?
Oh, maybe it's from here. Make host. There it goes.
Boom.
So, my BMW design work this morning or for the day.
Oh, nice. Vroom vroom. Did you bring any BMW mid-journey renders for your talk?
Yeah, I got all the stuff. It's on. I didn't even look really closely at the topic, but they want me to facilitate a session in the afternoon. And so I was like, yeah, okay, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But I'm also not worried about it too much.
Nice. Yeah,
Hey,
that'll be fun.
yeah, I think they're good people. I've done a couple of talks here over the years, and they've moved to a new facility in Santa Monica, so
Yeah,
super more convenient than it. And it used to be in I don't know where they were, Chatsworth or some godforsaken place
mm-hmm.
in the valley. Hey, I want to run something by you.
Sure.
That just occurred to me while I was shaving my beard. I was like, oh fuck, I gotta go out in the real world with real people. I was just like, oh, there's all kinds of hygiene you need to do.
Yeah, you and me both, man.
Literally, like, I mean, there could be potentially weeks that go by before I take out a razor and shave. Like, I'll trim, but I'm just kind of like, what's the point? Terrible. So the thing I wanted to run by you is, so I was thinking about, so if you get a chance, like maybe sneak a peek at the deck that Greg Lindy from Lux Typo prepared for us.
Okay.
Kemp and I went to go meet him. He's the guy who I sort of said, like, hey, could you propose kind of, what would you do if you were to do a rebranding or whatever? And I came away with like, okay, this is I wasn't like blown away. I was actually, let me go in. My host came out. Just a second. Hi, okay. How you guys? How you doing? I was a little bit late, so I started my thing. Yeah, it's fine. Just my thing, Jay.
Okay, let me see if I can find that document that he's talking about.
Just be a second, Dre.
Sure.
Has anyone showed up?
Brandel showed up.
Okay. I'll just be there in a second. Actually, I'm going to disconnect and I'll connect on the computer.
All right, sure thing. I'm checking out this file here. So, boom.
You're doing what I think.
Hey, Brandel, how you doing?
So far, so good.
That's good. That's good. All right, I'm checking out this file that what's called. It's in the branding evolution Discord.
Hi, Joshua.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Joshua. I don't
You have-
believe we've met before.
We have not. I just got an invitation from Julian,
Oh, great stuff.
Cool.
and yeah,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you. So yeah, I'm Joshua Singer. I am an associate professor at San Francisco State University, where I teach graphic design,
Cool.
and herd the cats in the program. As an academic, right, we do a lot of bureaucracy, but yeah. So I'm a graphic designer by trade. I've been sort of wrestling with design fiction and critical design for a little while now. A colleague of mine turned me on to New Futures Laboratories, and
Cool.
yeah, so I'm a fan. In the sense, I've been listening to the podcasts, which have been great. Yeah, I just got the work kit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you should head on over to my website and look at some of the work kit sessions that I've done in the past. It's good inspiration to get some ideas on different ways to use it.
I would love to do that. I just turned on one of my colleagues to the work kit, and he was actually thinking of trying to cram in a last little project this semester.
Nice.
On design fiction, and he was looking at the work kit, but we tried over lunch to do a few, and we feel like, yeah, we needed a little inspiration. So that'll be great. I'll definitely check that out. I listened to your podcast about your process, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Interested in the ways that you I guess are incorporating AI into your process.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of talk about that in design right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk. I'm a big fan of AI as a way to give you superpowers.
Yeah.
And sometimes just shortcut some of the more menial tasks that you might do in terms of writing down like what are all the words that are related to these concepts that I'm playing with. Well, rather than you doing the thinking, you can just let a machine do it for you, and it happens very, very quickly. And then you can start drawing the lines to the different words and making those connections, getting to the connection making. I like to talk about collecting the dots and then connecting the dots. And I think AI does a good job of collecting the dots for you. But I don't use AI most of my design fiction work is not I'm not using AI for the conceptual stuff. I'm using it to help me create visuals that I need really, really quickly. And everything else is, Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and that type of stuff. But when I do work kit, I could spend an entire day. It takes a long time to get through all this stuff and sift through ideas. So that's the reason why I use AI on the work kit stuff, because I need to try to do this in 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Otherwise I lose clients.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating. You've worked it into this tight little methodology, right? That like cranks out stuff every day. Yeah, I've been getting your emails. I haven't been able to read.
Oh, great.
But,
Awesome.
Yeah, just I think Julian said this, right? It's like the Pilates or
the kettlebells, my hot yoga studio of design fiction.
Yeah, I mean, it's craft, right?
Yeah.
Craft and process. And so, yeah, that's really great to see. Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated with it myself. I haven't dabbled that much in it. I've been sort of experimenting a little bit. I tried it as a writing partner this week. And it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I asked it to sort of throw out something, describe kind of what I do in this sort of like framework around this theory. And I'm not that great a writer. It takes me a long time to write, and
Yep.
it gave me a really nice first draft that I felt like, like wow, I could, yeah.
I find a good way to do that. I put myself in the same camp. I love writing. I come up with good ideas, but I'm not a great writer in that I don't fault, like, my tense varies all over the place. That typical writing stuff. But what I'll do is I'll stream of consciousness, just write out what it is I'm trying to say, and then I prime the AI with a prompt that is, I want you to very lightly edit this. Like, I want you to maintain the tone, maintain the colloquial, quirky nature of my writing, but I just want light editing. Just make sure the tense is consistent. Make sure that this is, and it does a very light edit, and it's great. It's still my writing. It's just now my editor is doing minor improvements, and that's a great way to prime AI to do that.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. I have, again, like, haven't delved that much into it, but I've almost been thinking like, I'm not a great writer, but I'm a decent editor. So I feel like, yeah, if the robot can write a good draft, I can kind of like collaborate and then refine and fix the things it didn't do right, or flesh out
Yeah,
what it really didn't. Yeah.
no, it's great.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. We're trying to figure out how we work this with, obviously, in education, because that's some of it's easy. I mean, I caught a student, writing a piece from, AI, and it was pretty easy to catch.
Mhm.
The question is, how do we, we're educating future designers. So we
Yeah,
have to figure out like
you have to teach them how to write with AI.
how to write with AI, maybe, how to conceptualize,
Collaborate with it. Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, and
I,
prototype with it.
that's
And
been the fun part, I think, of all the stuff that, I mean, definitely, following Dre's lead, but then the things that I've been doing, like on Instagram, like it was almost maybe because I'm just, I don't want it to be just, I don't want to, I like the work, so I don't want to just give it all to the AI. You know what I mean? So doing and it's exceptionally, it's fascinating. I just find it enthralling. And then what are the ways in which you can use it as, yeah, as if it were just a source of inspiration as opposed to the finished product,
yeah,
if you follow,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
so like what we did with the androids book project, it's like, it wasn't, just, what's the point of just telling the AI to write the book? I mean, that's just like not even, what is it that you really want to do then? If you're just telling the AI, I don't actually want to do this. Thinking of a student, and I've been a student for most of my life in some ways. Like if you don't actually want to do the work, don't spend your money trying to get an education. Figure out what it is that you really want to do and do that. You know what I mean?
I think I'm following you. Yeah, I mean, our issue in terms of AI with students is that our students are always hustling, and they're looking, for good reason. And I respect that with them.
Sorry, what's the reason?
The reason that they're hustling,
Yeah.
because we're a CSU. Our student, we have a large majority of first gen students. They're paying their way through school. They're working like part-time jobs, and
Okay, so it's like time constraints, busy, tired, just run out. Yeah, okay.
yeah, it's like, it's when I often hear from my students like what their lives are like, it's insane.
Yeah.
So they're looking, in the best case scenarios, they're being efficient and smart and strategic. And in the worst case, they're just looking to,
Cheat.
yeah, right. That's the worst. Uh, so yeah, so in terms of us in AI, there's part of that, like how do we make sure that it's something that's valuable to them? And how are we, we're all like learning this, it's pretty new for all of us in terms of practice.
Sure.
And for our students, they see it so for instance, a colleague was just showing me work from his, we teach graphic design and industrial design, and this was an industrial design class. And they were doing a chair design, and the student went through the normal process of sort of thumbnail sketchings and then some, sort of quick prototype sketches, and then did some stuff in AI. And the stuff in AI was right? It was super high res, really, high execution, some interesting ideas, but he wasn't actually able to execute any of those ideas. And it just wound up being, I don't know, there wasn't really anything valuable in the process. The students sort of thought it was a way to make them look better, instead of actually, investigating, iterating, synthesizing. And so, yeah, another colleague did a project where the students basically generated the entire graphic content in AI and then just did typography work on top of it. And I felt like that was, I don't know, it reminds me like when we first started doing digital stuff and everybody, everything was like Photoshop effects.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to equate it with the advent of image search on what it was that people would use as reference for drawing. So when image search came out, the complexity and the difficulty of getting image references to be able to produce something just dropped precipitously. People had their own libraries or their own paltry, terrible, embarrassing imaginations to draw on. And then we had these images, but then you started to see a sameness in the search results and a sameness in the reflecting representation of ideas. And so all concept art involving tigers is mostly done involving the first page and a half of image results for tigers and things like that. And all of George W. Bush's portraits are literally the top image search result for that particular person. So like, maybe it takes time for us to have the sort of notional or subconscious awareness of the sort of the telltale signs of it, or maybe it doesn't even take that long. But it's really more akin to the sort of the change in the quantity of availability rather than what people do with it. And if people really play with it, then that can be great, but it's going to be just as sloppy as people just dumping image search results into their decks if that's all they do with it and nothing more.
Yeah, I feel like we used to have this decentralized image or inspiration or mood board. Your book collection helped define, the designs and the stuff that you did. And the weird little ephemera that you would find in bookstores and magazine shops would give you that edge and give you that extra bit of inspiration. And then we went to centralized inspiration, where now everyone just goes to Pinterest or Behance or ArtStation, and everyone's looking at the same stuff. And you can see it in graphic design trends, where literally almost every 6 months there's like a new, it's a skeuomorphism, and now it's neomorphism, and now it's glass morphism, and like it's all these things that everyone's jumping on, because you go to Pinterest and you type like latest graphic design trend, you type that in there and you're seeing a sea of sameness. And it really hit home for me when I was doing some, I bought a trailer that I want to renovate and turn into something really fun and cool. And I went to Pinterest and I typed in like a vintage retro trailer makeover, and everything looked the same. It's like subway tiles and monochromatic designs, and it just looked like it came from like some like Good Housekeeping magazine design survey thing. And I decided, I want to do this NASA punk thing. And I started rendering stuff in Midjourney and realized, I have like this bespoke, personalized mood board based on weird little ideas. And we're going back to decentralized inspiration, where your Midjourney or Stable Diffusion renders that you create your own mood board that no one else will ever see, because it's conjured from the words coming out of your head. And so I think design's going to start to shift. People are going to start to find new ways of finding that private inspiration that other people don't get a chance to look at as well. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Hey, because I have a short day. I have to leave in probably like 35 minutes. Dre, so the two things. One thing, while Kim's here, I was thinking about our meeting on Monday with Greg from Lux Typo.
Yeah, I'm looking at the PDF now.
Yeah. So I put that up in the brand evolution channel, and I came away from it like I was excited, and I was like I wasn't quite sure how to respond. But my main thing was or no, not my main thing. I was just wondering, like I didn't know how to respond to it, and by that I mean it's like I didn't nothing struck my intuition. It's like okay, this is what we need to do. But I was in the shower this morning and I was thinking about it. And I had been, the night before, I'd been flipping through the Draplin book, right?
Yeah,
And feeling kind of like, just being like, oh man, this guy, what a guy.
let's call Aaron.
And, and where my mind went this morning was like, oh man, suppose, what would it be like if not doing a traditional, like, yeah, okay, here's whatever, 6 grand, which I'm sure is like a great price for good value comes out of that to do like a rebranding as proposing. Like, suppose we just did some branding from the future for our projects or for our projects, which are from the future. And for some reason, my mind went to like, what would, for the sheep project, Android's Dream,
Mhm.
what would be the trucker hat that you would get at the local feed supply store? What would be the branding on it? Who would be the feed supply store? What kind of, would it be like ST Micro, like sheep supplies, like you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and just thinking like rather than doing branding from zero and moving forward, if we just said, I don't know, the branding's been done, I don't know what it looks like, but here are some elements from it, which would be the kind of stuff we would do anyway, but we would
Mhm.
be starting from the present and then saying like, okay, with this branding system that we've developed, or these guidelines, or this vibe that we have, let's, what would we do so for ABC Solar Punk? Because there should be elements around it. Like if we were to
Mhm.
do a tote bag for ABC Solar Punk, or if we were to do I don't know, like a keychain. I don't know, just like the merch things, which are branding translated into material form, right?
Yeah.
What would those things be? And I don't know how to articulate that other than my ramble and literally thinking like, man, I would love what would Draplin do if you like, look, we got this Android sheep thing. Like, here are the things. There's a book. There's a bunch of cards. This is the future that we sort of imagine. Here's on the inside cover of the book, because the cover it's 4/4 on both sides. I guess that's just 4/4. What would be on the inside? I have this farm. There's some kind of ranch that I asked, I collaborated with Midjourney, made it, and on the branch, I just ended up putting like, it's like, I don't know, um, uh, um, uh, near future laboratory, Northwest fob, and then it's got a kind of coordinates, and then it's got like, hours 7 to 10 weekdays, something like that.
Mhm.
It does a weird thing, and if you said like, this is the world that we build, we're building it from the bottom up. Like, I couldn't tell you what this is. I can only create things for it or from it that kind of struck my fancy. I think that'd be fucking cool. Like, let's do a
Mhm.
book about it. And so my mind went to like, what would be the truckers hat? I mean, it's all like ranchery kind of stuff, isn't it? Sheep and ranchers. They get the trucker hat at the feed store because the guy's like, hey, Bill, you've been a customer. It is great. Or here's the calendar. The calendar, and it'll be like livestock on the calendar, the year calendar that you get at Christmas. You know what I mean? Are you feeling
Mhm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to think about. There's like I look at the near future lab as being, there's a bit of a master brand thing that needs to happen there. Um, and I think all the sub things that we do, I think they're their own entities, right? At the risk of creating this like matching luggage type of brand situation where everything is maybe too familiar. I think every project should have its own personality, its own opportunity to express itself uniquely, and then the master brand lives in there. Like it can be branded more subtly. It's kind of like a Spike Lee joint, right? It's like that every movie's got its own feel, but it's all coming from the same place. that's a way of looking at it. But when I think of, you know, like trucker hats and so on, yeah, that makes tons of sense, because a lot of what we're doing is just weird world building, but it's a creative world building where we make a
Well,
thing
it's
and then we do the next thing. Like,
totally.
we don't know what
Yeah,
we're doing in the long run. We're just kind of adding to the pile. Sorry,
yeah.
Brandon, go ahead.
I was interrupting you, so I will also apologize
No,
because
it's all
I'm
good.
also ethnically Canadian. I think the important thing is that, like, the value systems that are sort of presented by, to sound absolutely just design wank, like the value systems that are presented by Near Future Lab are crushingly pragmatic and really down in the weeds first, rather than a world first. And so I think looking at some of those things, and what kind, like some of those things like the trucker hat and the feedstock manual for the thing that the trucker is driving, are really, really valuable. But the fact that there doesn't need to be, it would be valuable for there to be something that holds it all together, does sort of mean that it needs to exist, but it also just needs to, it doesn't need to do much. It just sort of sits in the corner there and kind of holds the rest together, where the branding for the trucker hat and for the electric sheep and the ABC Solar Punk do most of the work on it. So it kind of just means that it needs to exist. It just doesn't need to be much. Yeah. But if it
Off
does,
topic.
if it is sort of, sorry.
I was just going to say off topic, like the mom comment last week. Who was that? Philip, who had to go, that said mom?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rand, I'm waiting for Dre to edit that out, make it into a, I don't know,
Yeah.
like a something.
Yeah, I gotta go and find that.
Yeah.
Make a soundboard.
T-shirt.
We just had
or
a
something.
beautiful moment there of a Canadian and a Kiwi interrupting each other. I feel like that would be a great, like, I don't know, something like a great show of just Canadian and a Kiwi trying to like other concepts. I would go on for hours just apologizing. But I second everything you guys are saying. Julian, is he a good buddy of yours, this the Lux typo guy? You're on mute.
I wouldn't say good buddy, but I would say, you know, we've kind of intersected in the past, and I've followed his work for years. I got a bunch of his posters and that kind of thing. Why do you ask?
I was just curious, because I felt like when we were in the meeting, it felt like, I almost felt like Near Future Laboratory was, in a weird way, more evolved in a branding concept way. Like I felt like some of our conversations around branding have evolved. And then now that I'm hearing you guys talk, it feels, it makes sense to have sort of like a master slide of branding, and then everything else sort of goes on. That makes sense to me. But when we were talking with him, I felt like maybe the lab, it's weird. It's like a weird harnessing in like a very finite way. And then I also don't see the lab in that way. So I'm not sure if I'm making any sense here. It's hard for me to think of the lab being branded in a very finite way. And I felt like that's what he does, right? Like he like do that. Yeah, I don't know. I got nothing there.
I'm personally a fan of branding in a finite way. I think there's something wonderful about having, you know, a consistent color, a consistent typeface, a consistent logo, so that you can, I just love seeing like a logo that communicates really well, that doesn't actually say anything. Like it's just this nice visual that you can just literally brand it on things in little places. And you know, everything I learned from branding, I learned from heavy metal album covers growing up as a kid. And I've always been a big fan of Iron Maiden albums, because Derek Riggs, the illustrator, had this very specific symbol that he would use to sign his paintings. And it became an Easter egg hunt. Every album you looked at had this this like circle with a line and a little arrow symbol, and that I thought it was like the Iron Maiden logo. It turns out it's just the illustrator's
That's super
signature.
funny.
But you can find it on all the early albums, in the album covers all over the place, and something like that, like that's a finite artifact that exists in all these places. And I love the idea that, like, you know, if a Near Future Lab having, you know, a logo that could be treated like that, you could release something into the world and just, you know, put this little symbol somewhere, and that's your sign that
Yeah.
came from us.
Yeah, sorry, I was wandering around my house when you were talking, Kemp. I didn't mean to leave you twisting. I do really agree with what you were saying, and I think that a brand mark for NFL, that's why it has to do so little, because it's always going to end up doing a lot simply by residing in these other worlds. You know, it's there, and it frames and grounds what to expect and how to react to something. It's like if you see a flat color and like a vague post, a vague book, kind of just a single word, but then there's a swoosh somewhere. It's like it immediately completely changes the tone of it, and
Right.
that's useful. But you don't want to then have to dominate that with a style guide of palette or of the use of
Right.
different language case and things like that, because that turns it from a master brand into a line. And
Right.
NFL is not a line. It's a thing that has the ability to conjure different worlds through these individual things. And NASA Punk is a line. It's Dre's line. These are things that need to be able to live on their own, but there's an enormous utility in being able to frame, like, this is the way that you respond. These are the ways that you understand what's going on here. And so it's good, but yeah, it really needs to live on all of these different things. And so it has to be approached really, really lightly, I think.
Yeah,
That was
much
much better said, Randall. Thank you. Because like I'm thinking, when I think about in fashion, like the swoosh is a good example. There's so many luxury brands where, you know, like if you take the Chanel, or, you know, if the person doesn't know it's YSL or Chanel, like it has no value or no perceived value to them. And I feel like the thing I love about these projects is that logo would not exist with these, right? So I feel like, but I also like the idea of there being like a hidden mark, like a master mark somewhere. But I wouldn't want, I feel like, you know, for the lab to become like, this is an NFL branded shortcut, that's why it's valuable. That seems counterintuitive to the whole process, which no one said is the way it's going, but branding kind of sometimes can be that.
Yeah. I kind of jumped in the middle of the conversation, but I'm just curious if this falls into you know, what we're talking about, or is offer opinion on it. But if you look at the last image in the Android stream channel for a minute, it's kind of just like a collage that was put up that I made a few days ago. If you just kind of click once, then I might expand for you. Where it was kind of just I was kind of reviewing some of the, you know, some of the stuff coming out of the book, you know, with the images of the sheep and some of the language, and yeah, it turned into sort of I don't know, it was kind of just free thinking. But you know, there's the NFL, or you know, the Near Future Lab kind of just slapped it on the truck as part of it. And then I was kind of loosely thinking of this as just sort of a portal to go find out more information about, you know, the electric sheep in a way. But you know, it's just sort of referencing what this world is a bit. It's using a lot of language that was kind of pulled from what Julian was writing about the sheep in the context of the book. And then, you know, some other thoughts. So, I mean, does this fall into, like, where does this sit, I guess, in people's minds of fitting NFL brand.
Well, there's a few things I like about it. I like
electric
the
sheath.
I like the non-design aspect of it. I think there's something kind of fun about it being put together like this. And to me, this feels like, does this live in the Near Future Lab cinematic universe? Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. There's a truck that exists, and it's part of the universe. But then there are these other things that get to exist in this universe, and they don't have to. Like I said, it doesn't have to be matching luggage.
Lost you.
I think Jed's got an airplane flying between him and his satellite connection.
Yeah, he's phasing out.
Dematerializing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it too. I like that the non-design thing draws me. I'm drawn to that, in the same way that I'm sort of drawn to the idea of oh, hey Drew, of just that idea of of building the world from going to the world and seeing what we find there, and we're going to find a trucker hat, right? If we went to this place here, guarantee you, everyone walking in there has got Wranglers on, a little bit bow-legged, has a trucker hat on, and is asking about, how's alfalfa doing or whatever.
I resemble that comment.
So I do wonder about it. And I get the idea of the master mark. Part of me wonders, do we already have it? And I'm wondering, I started messing around. I'm not saying that I'm a brand designer by any means, but I put together the alternate mark just as an experiment because I wanted to play around with stuff, and I'm continue to play around with it. It keeps changing color, and I'm okay with that. Or not so I don't know. It's a question, and I'm wondering if there's a way to turn the brief around in this way to Greg, because I'm not sure exactly what comes out the other side of his proposal. I have an idea, but I'm just wondering if it's and he's totally into these ideas. He told me, man, it's I love what you're doing and the experiment that's going on. Almost a sense of relief that it's not just traditional branding project. We need business cards, whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that it makes me think
I'm
about.
gonna ask him to listen to this, by the way. Just so
Awesome.
Say hey.
One of the things that it makes me think about is so what a brand mark, what the swoosh will do to that line of vague book posts that I mentioned earlier is it's going to settle people's expectations and make them have confidence that what it's telling them is this sort of mood of athletic confidence and can-do-itiveness, or whatever you want to call it. And so then the question is what thematically do you want to add to all of these artifacts that comes out of the master mark in Near Future Lab? And something that springs to mind as a possibility is that you might want to just throw everybody a little off balance and maybe scare them a little bit. So maybe that's actually something that's completely in opposition to just about everything that everybody wants to do with brand marks. And so you need to make it scary and weird. So those are things where if the primary role of it is not to sort of settle and land things and to be don't worry about this, we got this kind of thing, but just wait, what? Then that's a really critical kind of aspect of it, because it allows it to be drawn out and it gives it much more room to succeed, because that isn't very heavily trafficked as the sort of the function for a master brand mark as well. So yeah.
I've only just skimmed this PDF, and I will peruse it properly. But it just going through, I'm liking I'm liking what I'm seeing in terms of references leading up, and then I think he's got the 4 typefaces, the select logo types that he's playing around with, and I see where he's coming from, and I think a lot of that to me, I feel like a lot of the conceptual lifting has already been done with the current Near Future Lab logo. It's got that kind of retro aesthetic, and I think I like the
Actually,
juxtaposition.
I've gotten rid of that one. I no
Oh, you've
longer
gotten rid
use
of
that one.
Oh, you don't use, okay. I
Yeah.
like I like
I
it,
mean, it's still some places, but I'm slowly kind of.
but you
yeah.
have it on this on your card set, right? Like this logo right here.
That is not on the new card set.
Okay, it's not a new card set. Okay, so I mean, I like that because I think you've tapped into this idea of like a retro future look that speaks nicely to the Near Future Lab. I think that works well. And I look at the, you know, Hot Pockets and Sudafed and Ivy and Chase Knowles examples, and it feels like it lives in this world. It has a bit of a retro look to it, and I think that's a nice direction to go into, and I think a good logo mark, a logo type, would be great. What I would definitely encourage is, well, what's the logo? What's the brand mark that doesn't use type at all? I think that's an important place to play because Near Future Laboratory, unfortunately, NFL is a very, you know, well used 3-letter acronym, and it's fine, but as far as a logo, I think it would be better if the short form is a symbol and not the letters NFL. And it's just like, you know, when you do icon design, like create a symbol that represents what you're doing. Don't put letters in an icon. The whole point of it is to not use letters. So doing something clever that way would be a nice way to create that icon without relying on the letters NFL. And then it then just becomes repetition. Like the swoosh looks nothing like Nike, but it conveys an idea, and over time it just becomes burned in your brain as a symbol for that company. I think we could do the same thing in terms of something that becomes, you know, the symbol for what near future laboratory means. As long as it's not a beaker, that would be the first easy thing to get to.
I second that. Yeah, I've had similar ideas for maybe not icons, but maybe like an avatar or something, like a RV with a giant clock in the middle of it, or just something not cartoony but memorable and cute, and that can be remembered.
Near future seems to be as one concept, and lab seems to be the other.
Yeah.
Just to say it that way. I've done a lot of logo development, just so you guys know. My background there was my dad's designed a lot of world-class winning logos, for many clients. And I grew up thinking of marks, looking at marks. And I support everything you just said. It's how do you concept the future, the near future especially, and bring it into focus or something. I'm seeing paving, stepping stones. I'm seeing clocks with magnifying glasses. I'm seeing
a magnifying glass in the shape of a question mark.
There you go.
There, see?
Focusing time onto, the horizon of possibility. There's so many different visual anchors. Julian?
Bueller?
Yeah, I'm here.
Mom.
Was that a question?
Yeah, I just want to hear what you think. I presume you sort of came up with that name. What are your visual? What do you see as icons if you had to? If we were just using a rebus?
It's the dude. It's Augie. Or Chester, whatever. There's something. I don't see something like the Yeah, it's like it's the dude, not the dude, not the Jeff Bridges dude, but the I think I brought some with me to this workshop. This guy.
I love the pipe. The pipe is a like an icon, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
or question marky or something.
There's something about it.
Could
Like
put-
even I was thinking
Could
about
you
doing
put a
that.
question mark in the smoke?
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, totally. Um,
And that pipe's been around a long time. It's a good pipe.
it's a good pipe. My not really my sister, but she refers to herself as my sister. I sent her, we were catching up and I sent her a bunch of stuff, including that. She's like, "Oh, do you smoke a pipe now?" I was like, "That's not me. It's
What's
Augie."
interesting about that is this is not a pipe. This is not your future.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, fun stuff you could do there, but I don't see like a, like a. Well, I don't know. I mean, there is, so Dre, that to your point, and I think also, Brandon, to yours, it's like there is some development, there's some work to be done there, and I like there's something like it's almost like retro but anti-retro in a way, because I'm drawn to, as you guys know, like all like the symbology around a particular era. And I think it was because if I were to say without trying to be like a absolutely like a historian or something, there was something about the moment of like the 60s, 70s, maybe even the 80s that felt like it was like full of potential. When I look back at it nostalgically, like, oh wow, you can now get a 28.8 modem, like double the speed.
It was
And there was like, and even when I was just in Detroit, and before the pandemic, I'd go to Detroit like maybe once every year, every other year for one thing or another, and it's just I loved the sense of potential there, as decimated as it was. And you'd see these 2-story 70s era industrial buildings, like wow, they made stuff there. It's probably just like a machine shop and the glass block, and there was an Augie, sitting on the loading dock smoking a cigarette between shifts, or just to work out some frustration or whatever. And there was a sense of I don't know, I'm making this up because it's vintage, but bringing that kind of can do spirit. And I say this now, it's like routinely, and if I'm giving a talk or just talking to someone, it's just like, man, can you imagine to summon forth the fortitude and the foresight and the energy and the will to say we're going to go to the moon. And you know how we're going to do it? We're going to get 500,000 people, $100 billion, whatever it was, $1 trillion, and we're going to hand build one spaceship to get this thing done. And I feel like that there's something, and it was and there was also an era when I guess like enough was enough. There was a point where it's just like I'm good, in a sense. You think about it, it's like if you wanted to be wealthy, you became an orthodontist, and you were happy with making $600,000 a year. And it's like it feels like all those sensibilities of like if we could draw from it. So I don't know what I'm saying at this point, but it's like
Yeah.
there is something about this retro, but I don't want to go too retro. And also I feel like we do need a break, just in a pragmatic sense, a break, a clean break from the current logo, the one that Drew has on his hat, because I think this is something else from what that was. I'm not saying that we don't, we can't use retro vibes. I mean, I've gone like completely, I don't know, you guys, graphic designers, would know better what I've done with the current logo that I'm just kind of throwing out there. And it's on the spine of the books that are coming out and these kinds of things. But it went someplace else that I was kind of like, okay, I kind of like that. I'm also happy to continue to evolve it. It's not like we're locked for like 12 years. We spent $100 million on a rebrand, and all the factories have been rebranded. It's not like that kind of thing, or Pepsi One or something.
It makes me think that you want to be retro, almost to back the car up to that time when the future was bright, and then let's maybe turn and go in to a different future than the one we got.
That's it. Because, and that's why, like, that's very succinct way of putting what goes through my head, like the stuff I'm doing on Instagram. Where I'll pull this brand that somehow I've been feeling like Altair, which
future isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, and you swerve it. So now Nabisco is making computers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wholesome computers.
the
This, yeah, the
ingestible,
Keebler elves.
the ingestible, digestible survey of your GI and tasty snack.
Yeah, like, and Rockwell is making saltines. I don't know.
There's something
It's almost
about
it's like that beautiful thing that they did in that Apple series that's about For All Mankind. You guys
yeah.
watch that?
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say this reminds me a bit of kind of what I think of when I think of like NASA punk, and I think of
Yeah.
For All Mankind, right? It's like here's an alternate future that happened, but with NASA punk going back to like the 70s and the 80s, I keep saying that, it's like this is a time where like space travel seemed more dangerous and difficult than it is today. Like now it just seems like it's the domain of rich billionaires that just like the only
Yes, that's it.
thing separating you from going to space is money. But once upon a time it was effort and training and
Will
determination.
and enthusiasm, commitment,
And
dedication to
we live in
something larger than
yeah.
yourself, not yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And we live in a world today, like today we've fast forward to the future where we are today, where I think a lot of technology is taken for granted. I think Louis C.K. says it really well when he's talking about people taking for granted like Wi-Fi on the airplane. He's like, you're in a chair in the sky. Like you should be amazed that this is happening. And I think if we go back to that time, it's almost like we pivot. And every time when I write in my design fiction daily, I always refer to the future as just a timeline. I try not to use the word future very often. I just say timeline because I like the idea that it's alternate. It doesn't. I'm playing more in the many worlds theory than I am playing in some deterministic future.
That's an interesting idea in terms of the near future. Like, part of it is having your senses open and seeing what's possible, and then the other part is having your choice, being a choice. So the idea of like you're selecting from the horizon of possible futures is a navigational tool. That's what the near future lab or this whatever you're talking about, going towards. You want to evoke this idea that we're on. It's like a GPS for the future, a wayfinder, like in a sense. Like you want that pin on the map, but in the map of that timeline somehow.
I just want to jump in for a minute. This is a very interesting conversation for me, kind of in my wheelhouse. And so as someone who's doesn't know anything about this yet, other than having seen some of the NFL stuff and Julian's seen your Instagram posts of the like classified ads for the future RVs. Right, and a lot of that style, and from what I can see, like in the visual stuff, right, in the work kit and all, right, there's this retro future, and right, there's the risk of it being simply nostalgic, right, and then eventually we would be nostalgic for some other era. So there's nothing really absolute about this kind of like, early space age, late modern kind of look. But what I think is interesting about it in terms of, right, the idea of looking at futures, right, we can only imagine, it's like science fiction, right? We can only imagine the future based on our existing knowledge, right? Based on the things that we know. So this idea of like shifting it, I think someone said like backing up, right? Like backing up the timeline or backing up to this aesthetic, that I think what you just expressed in terms of like this can-do time. I mean, it was a time when, right, like you could actually work on your own car because it wasn't, all microchips, where, there was a lot of people doing stuff in their garages. And so that, right.
The whole homebrew thing, the whole homebrew computer thing.
Yeah, right. And so I get that with like the hackability, right, of those vehicles that you're creating, that this future is, right. We always look at, before before Star Wars, right? Before you saw like dirt in the future, right? Before you saw dirty things or Blade Runner, right? The dystopian future, the messy future, right? This idea that
the perverted future.
Yeah. So I think, right, you've sort of chosen a certain spot that we recognize. I just wonder though, because here's the thing, like I get it, because I remember like you know, I remember my mom's 71 Nova and, you know, and what that kind of time was like. And I remember all those aesthetics and that kind of resonates for me and I get it. I guess I'm just sort of coming in as like, bringing it back to the NFL marketing thing, like what's the brief? I guess I don't, I don't know enough here. So maybe that's just, I don't, and I'm not asking anybody to get me up on the brief, but what would be the goal of creating a visual language that's specific, say to a, you know, something that's nostalgic, sort of playing devil's advocate here a little bit, like what, you know, are you going to pigeonhole yourself, right? The idea is like you want a mark that's always going to work and work across anything, and then theoretically work across different like timelines. Like, what is that? What happens with
Cool.
that logo on something in the future? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to still reference that era? Maybe they're just specific projects that need to be branded in certain ways in order to locate them, right? In a history, in a timeline, in an aesthetic.
I just saw 10,000 NFL logos go rolling through my brain and stop on the current one, you know.
That was a little bit of that was in the conversation, the first conversation I had with this guy Greg. So Joshua, you can there's a channel called Branding Evolution where there's a deck that he presented to myself and Kemp after I kind of gave him, you know, brief would be wouldn't quite describe it, but we had a series of conversations and I was sort of explaining to him the history and where things have evolved and where things are going and where I'm sensing this is all an experiment. And one of the things I want to experiment with is like almost like anti-branding in a way, not getting too locked into a system that becomes a kind of fascistic stranglehold on creative potential and possibility. So I almost like imagine like it's always constantly evolving. You look at it, it's kind of like a you know, like a cells dividing, forming into something new, like kind of almost in this perpetual way. You know, without it getting to the point where it's like completely illegible, but not you know, almost like constructive chaos is kind of in a way what I want to embrace, not for the purpose of like destroying things, but for the purposes of like I don't know, you know. I think it comes down to what Random was saying about, sorry, Philip was saying about there is a purpose. And I think the undergirding purpose of all this is that we want to build more habitable worlds. And so in order to do that, we find ways to really feel into those worlds, not just projecting into them, but going to them and bringing things back. And sometimes we might bring stuff back that is it's unexpected. You know, like how did you bring back a Maxwell House RV? Like, what's that about? That doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, well, it makes sense there. Well, why are you trying to impose your current set of, you know, filters and ways of sense making on something, on a world that might, yeah, of course it's going to seem foreign to you because we dug into it like we were archaeologists. Archaeologists dig into the back all the time and they're trying to figure out who the hell were these people? I can't believe that they worshipped, you know, this tree. That doesn't make any sense at all. But to them, it was like, it was their world. It was everything. It was everything. And so I think we bring a lot of like our kind of anthropocentric like kind of perspective on things, be like, that's not a future. A future to me was like us going to Mars. And I was like, that's Elon's future. Did you not see that? Do you not realize that? Yeah, but what about the moon? That was like a collective of like of billions of people who were like, cool, let's do this. And another billion people were like, that's the stupidest idea ever. We got a war in Vietnam, cities in America are burning down, there are revolutions going on. You want to go to the moon? And can you bring that chaos together in a consistent way that doesn't maybe just have one brand mark, you know, but it's evolved because we went to this other world. We went to as like the Apple show does. We went to this, you know, future. They don't always mark the dates, and it's like the Beatles were playing at Coachella. Whoa, stop right there! What are you talking about? And there were EVs in 1978. How did that happen? Well, someone said like, that's my dream. And I'm going to make sure that people feel it in the same way that they happen to be feeling today. But there was no linear timeline.
The streetcars were never wiped off. You know, the thing that this is resonating.
Sorry guys, I got to jump. I'm really sorry. I got this workshop starting. This is great though. I mean, you know, so I'm saying like, we're on it. So please carry on. I'll definitely listen. I mean, I'm so bummed. This would have been, I wish this was a boring office hours.
Well, blessing will save us today. Oh,
I'm
go
at,
ahead. I
I'm
was
at,
just-
I'm,
I was-
I'm at BMW, so we're gonna do a little, we're gonna infect them a little bit.
I had to bail last week.
Mom, oh, I can get out quickly now. Wait, let me try again.
Oh, Mom, you took off, Mom.
He
I'm
was
sorry.
reminding me of Seattle. He was here. I was going to ask him, basically Seattle had this monorail vision that came from its World Fair. And they built a mile-long track of monorail that went from downtown core to where the fairgrounds were. And so you could ride the monorail back and forth. And this was in the 50s. You can see it. It's a vision of the future. It's a retro thing. But it baked into Seattle's archetype of Seattle. The future is here. We can ride the monorail. And you would see it all the time. Anytime you drove downtown, a monorail would go over your head. And it was the coolest damn thing. And then they had a vote to extend the monorail. The light rail thing was happening. They voted to extend the monorail and nothing happened. The public voted again. They funded the monorail 3 times. It landed on the committee's desk, the council, and they did nothing with it because they already had behind the scenes contracts with Mom. They already had these behind the scenes contracts. And by the time that initiative failed 3 times, it was just over. It decimated Seattle's idea of itself and its own picture of its own future. And I really wonder about the role of, like we just went to the rockets and the billionaires. Back in those days, there was enough happening all around us that there was a potential future, and you could see those futures growing through all of these little actions that were happening in the context. But I think it's gotten to a point now where people feel like that's just another piece of hype. They don't trust the actual futures they're seeing. And so then it's just, a masturbatory effect of the billionaires trying to, get to the moon. It's not a cultural initiative that transforms garages everywhere into building home rockets or whatever.
Well, our vision of the future is typically more technology and more convenience, right? I mean, that's, it's constantly like, how can we make our lives easier with robots, or right? And
as an industrial designer, I call this the 6 inches problem, because people do not care where their water comes from or where it goes. They care about the 6 inches when it's falling from the tap. What temperature is it? And that's the water. Does it taste good? Great. I'm done with it. That 6 inches exposes the entire Western civilization. We've invested the quality of the planet on that front end experience of luxury. Turn the taps, drink my water. Don't worry about the rest of it. But it basically defines an interface for what humans want in their world. We've invested billions to discover what that is. And if we don't engineer that proper 6 inches, it doesn't matter what's happening on the back. We're free to reinvent that. That's why, sustainability might work.
I think civilization is caught in the marshmallow test, right? You give a kid the marshmallow, and you have to, if you don't eat
I
it,
don't want to wait. I'll have that now. Yeah.
right? And I think we're constantly doing that because, right? I mean, when we're as designers, right, we're usually designing for not that far in the future. And people who are designing really far in the future, like if you look at like Arup, their foresight and innovation folks. I mean, they're talking like, hey man, we're looking 100 years into the future. And that's pretty impressive from a design perspective, design and engineering, right? That's a big deal. But that's not where our problems are, right? Like we can kind of keep cruising as we are probably for another 100 years or more. But
Architects
don't look at the long now foundation, right? Like what happens, I kind of feel like, do you know about transition design, right? A lot of that's come out of Carnegie Mellon with Terry Irwin and
how to design for a green, sustainable world and make the transition.
Yeah, right. So we're designing for the transition. We can't, right?
Yeah, I was in this conversation with Africa, one of the nations wanted to invest in our geopolymer cement technology. So we were going to go over to Africa and rebuild, or rather build, green cities, because there weren't cities to tear down. We could leapfrog over the transition, and the transition itself is a costly thing. It's just a bunch of interim stopgaps that last 200 years. And the way I look at that is replace the climate changed. Climate catastrophes are going to provide an opportunity for rapid rebuild where they happen. So you just lock and load for saving communities as they get knocked over, and that way you're not wiping out infrastructure that doesn't need to be wiped out. And the whole recyclability of the urban landscape is a big thing for me. So I wanted to say this: architects design buildings according to the spec of what the customer wants. They write an RFP, and the architects come in and meet that. Clients don't know to save a wetland that's on their property. They don't realize they could build differently and maintain the ecosystems around them. And like William McDonough came up with grass roofs, and everybody was amazed that you could put a roof on the top surface of the building. And those ideas are big and important, but not well adopted, strictly because clients don't know, clients don't care. And architects don't have the chutzpah or the position really to say, I'm going to build you a green building, not the building you want. And so we have literally designed a city, a whole lifestyle for people who don't understand. We left nature out, we forgot. And if we really want to expand to the stars, you're not going to do that without bringing nature with you. So designing cities that don't incorporate nature is antithetical towards the whole, expansionist dream, ultimately, because we're basically just evolving ourselves into, dormitory rats at this point.
Yeah. You know the band Devo, right? So
No.
Devo, are we not?
Oh, Devo, sure, yeah.
And they based it on, I don't know what, they were, I don't know what they studied.
The evolution, yeah, absolutely. I was there.
So I kind of I've been trying to conceptualize, sort of the sustainability thing as this long arc of civilization, and kind of when do we go back? When do we go back as really? When do we go back to the Neolithic and do it really well?
Yeah.
Right. So that's a very long picture, because if we go,
I call that ancient futures. That's what my vector is for that.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Is that something you made up, or is that something?
Yeah, I make up my own hangers on word and concept. So ancient futures. I have a whole playlist on ancient futures.
Oh, I'd love to hear more about that, because I'm kind of interested in that, and this kind of in that arc. And I think it's also an interesting way then to reframe the past, right? Reframe the past, imagining the future, being able to make the decisions that we make now, right? Because if we are actually looking towards, if our goal is a completely sustainable and peaceful and gentle Neolithic, right, we have a goal.
Yeah.
Right, and you can make decisions based on that, and
you can immediately see if something doesn't fit the goal.
Yeah, so I have that. So my research, my work now, I didn't really talk about this, but in my intro, but I'm interested in kind of a weird combination of typography, geography, and design fiction. And so I've been looking a lot at, I've been examining signs and typography and things in geographic space. And a lot of that is looking at historical trends and changes. And in doing that research here in the East Bay of San Francisco, the thing that I stumbled upon pretty quickly was, is that part in the timeline where, the genocide of the native peoples here, it was a big transition, going to the West. So a lot of times when I'm looking at this, I sort of try to frame things like, what would the, Irgun tribe that lived, where I live now, what would they do? When they get up in the morning, what do they do? When they have to go, right? And it always kind of puts, the interesting about it is it makes our current state so absurd. Sometimes it makes me feel like I'm actually living in, right, a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because you can feel the future they didn't get to live in.
The future of whom?
Well, if like I have personally a strange experience because I was really a producer and a high tech guy. I did all sorts of technology invention, and then I got disabled, and I've spent 10 years, in bed doing research and reading, but literally out of the loop. And so when I had a coma 3 weeks, all this resurrection, come back, and I literally have experiences where I'm fucking in the future. I used to only imagine. I did not see any of the stuff happen. All of a sudden, like the AI thing, I watched and waited and watched and waited and watched and waited, and now I got AI. Yeah. So for my personal experience is one of waking up a bit in the future that I used to spend a lot of time imagining. And so I have a real daily experience almost of that, like, what would it be like to be Neolithic and then all of a sudden have a digital watch or whatever?
Yeah, I think we're similar generations, and I often think about like my great grandparents were born in the 1890s, early 1890s, and how their world changed. From like when they were kids, because they were in the old country, like no electricity, right? Horses, no phones, right? And they, my great grandmothers lived until the early 70s, mid 70s. So, they saw a man on the moon. And so I start to think about, right, like, well, I tell my students this, I'm like, we used to have fax machines and we thought that was fucking unbelievable, right?
Right. And they're still around.
They are. So yeah, I get that too. There was somebody, I forget, like, heady tech days, late 90s, somebody telling me, he was like, well, all of our data is going to be in the cloud and you'll be able to access it like through your eyeglasses. And I thought, like, that's really cool, but we won't see that in our lifetime. And
yeah, that's probably going to happen next year now.
Yeah. I mean, the cloud thing, right? Like that in and of itself, that seemed plausible at the time, right? There was stuff already set up kind of for that, but it was clunky.
The cloud. Yeah, it's a good marketing term. I like the cloud. I like when people ask me what the cloud is, I like to remind them that the cloud is an underground bunker guarded with men with guns.
Not heaven.
Yeah, it's not heaven. It's an extremely secured data center. Heavily
I think people
protected
do
and guarded.
That's an interesting thing in and of itself, I think, because watching how people learn and understand things, which I get to do as an exhibit designer, and then seeing how that apprehension changes their understanding and their behavior and relationship to place entirely. You can recontextualize people just by small things, and that it almost seems like we need a primitive physics of the future for people to understand how to ingest ideas about the future in a safer way that has them. Like, do you guys know about the cognitive trade-off hypothesis? It's an actual thing. I can find the video. There's a guy who's studied primates and developed games and stuff. And basically, if I put a bunch of numbers on the screen right here, imagine one on every one of my fingertips, and then you had to touch the fingertips where they were, and I could hold them up and you could touch them. And if you touched all 10, I'd give you a treat. That's the basis of the game. Then later, I just show you the fingertips later, and then I take away, and I just leave dots, but they're numbered, so you have to touch them in the right sequence. And so, boom, chimps just rip this problem apart. They can just look for a microsecond at this situation, take it away, and even don't leave the pips there. Now they just touch the screen where they were. And they set this sort of escalating game up, and they're amazing at it. And then you put a human in the same situation, they can't do it. We can't do it. We don't have the function that was there that most mammals have, which is spatial memory that allows you to, at a glance, see it and come back. And I think some of us still have this to different degrees, but the cognitive trade-off hypothesis says that spatial ability for memory was sort of rotated axially in time, so that we have this primitive model of temporality. And that's one of the major distinctions in our brains over, you know, why we live there. It's worth a watch. There's a great video about it.
Is it the minefield
Yes.
video from Vsauce? Yeah, I pasted it in the
Yeah.
Zoom chat.
I
Yeah,
just
that sounds
posted
really
another
interesting.
one in that's about Neolithic symbols and why there's coherence across the globe. There's like 30 to 40 symbols that anthropologists find all over the place. And I think this guy's thesis is accurate. It's an event in the sky that was documented by everybody who saw it. And so quite an interesting video, a long one. Nice.
That's cool.
Nice channel, a little bit odd channel, but good one.
Sorry,
Yeah,
that last one that you said, Philip, the video, is that the one, the cognitive trade-off hypothesis? That was
Somebody posted it, yeah.
Yeah, it's the link that I just posted. Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that. It feels like there's a lot of things that we've stopped doing that we used to need to do. And you know, technology or advancements in civilization has made it so that we don't need to. Like a perfect example is the just rote memory in general. You know, I think it was Einstein that said something to the effect of imagination is more important than knowledge. And you know, we live in a world where we don't need to remember anything. We just need to know how to conjure. We need to learn how to ask the question. Google knows everything. Yeah, I think conjure or invoking. I like this idea. It goes well with, like, you know, summoning the genie from the cloud.
Well, that's why I'm getting to a language. There might need to be a conlang that works for Neo-Luddites, as opposed to, it's almost like a meeting place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we live in this world where everyone's got some form of attention deficit disorder because we don't practice remembering things. We don't practice the craft of memory. You know, we don't take the time to memorize a poem. I have a friend, and she just, like, she'll recite The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe. She'll just recite it from beginning till end perfectly. And this is just a thing that she did once upon a time. And I thought, what a great exercise to do, is just remember a long poem.
My dad has a really good little jazz ditty he sings about the three bears and Goldilocks, and it's just a great little ditty. But he's the life of the party every time he breaks it out. Everybody, and it's just one song he's memorized of. Yeah, you know, he doesn't have any other repertoire.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of songs that I've memorized because I'm a musician, but I practice every week. I'm with a bunch of guys and we're playing music, and muscle memory comes in. Muscle memory comes in where I can sing a song without really thinking about the words, and I'll get every word right. But at the same time, I'm playing something on the guitar that a lot of people would be like, how do you do that? It's that I can't do this, whatever this trick is. I can barely do that, but I can play a complex riff on a guitar and sing words on top of it, and also be expressive as I sing it. So that's a skill. I think a lot of people don't find ways to practice that.
This is getting to the whole problem of, like, music used to only be live. And so I have this whole thing about birds, and I play with birds all the time. And I've realized that bird flocks have this thing going on that neural synchrony arises from their twittering, and they all know where they're at, and they all know what mood they're in. And if a predator comes in, they can feel that mood change, and they understand something's happening way over there because of something in that other bird lobe's brain making a noise. And so my brain is synced. And so neural synchrony is a fascinating concept when you start looking at it as humans. And the way we have lost skills that we used to have, whether it's making something or interacting in a certain way, I sort of bucket. I've never gotten to say this idea as neoteny, as cultural neoteny, rolling us back, keeping us domesticated. Most domesticated life forms are neotenous to the adult form. So, like dogs, behave towards humans as puppies would, and towards their parent. And that neoteny, that holding back evolutionary of certain characteristics so they don't develop into adult form, is a well-documented kind of evolution. And it wouldn't show up in any significant way as us being evolutionarily divergent if our epigenetics just are holding back traits. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so I think that social, dialing into your society and clicking into the right social norms is a kind of neoteny. And we're left not thinking or rather deferring that choice away from our own center and our own power and our own creativity and our own ability to respond in the moment with authority, a new direction. And I think that's a big problem when you look at the mass effect of society in the future and how do we make changes. And that's why this organization is so critical to me, because having a vision of the future, which most people lack vision, but giving them a vision and they can hold on to it once they see it, it gives a new, that's sort of what was around in the 80s. Everything was popping. Even if you didn't do it or you didn't know it, something was going to come up and you could feel it. And there was enough of those things that were positive and in the right direction that the negative ones were like, okay, we're going to get there. This is the straight part of the road. And I think that is sort of why society is a little bit more chaotic right now, because I don't think that holographic belief in a positive future is out there, because too much 1984, and nobody else. It's the dystopic function of cyberpunk is not working as designed in the eyes of the authors. I bet you, sci-fi authors intended to write these things to create a insight into the future and a better set of choices. That's why they target dystopias. They're trying to find the flaws, but instead we should be writing utopias, because that's where the money is. That's where we're gonna.
Well, I think the cautionary tale dystopias have effectively turned into playbooks for for rich people, right?
That's perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, 1984. So I graduated high school in 1984. And of course, the keynote from our student, rep, was on that.
Welcome to the future, boys.
Right. And, and I was, I was kind of a scrappy dystopian new wave punk rocker, who saw the world through dark lenses.
You could see how it really was.
Yeah. it was Reagan era, right? Reagan, Thatcher, and So, I don't, right? Late modernism, nuclear war, but I don't see that like in my current students. I don't see that kind of dystopia anymore. I see a kind of resignation in some cases towards what looks like a bleak future. We talk about like where I live, like on the San Francisco Bay, like how much of this is going to be underwater, within our lifetime, at least when it floods. That's like,
it was still theoretical when we were kids.
Yeah, it was kind of science fiction, right? And
but now it's real. Now there's really flooding and really fires and so there's a harsher reality they're looking at.
Yeah.
As like a nihilism has gone in. I'm Joshua. I'm Steve. I'm here now again. Philip, we've met, I think, before, but I teach students too, and it's like a nihilism is like creeping in. As you say, they're kind of giving up. Even my own daughter's like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
I lost my nephew. I lost my nephew during the pandemic. He killed himself.
No. Oh no.
And it just affected me and made me aware of the dire importance that there is some tangible weight that people could put their weight on. That's why I think DAOs are interesting. These glimmers of organizations that could arise and solve problems of the commons and fight for things rather than just being a purely, delusionary capitalist solution. It's like we really need those, or the kids will just, opt out.
Yeah.
And it's like we really need to find the strange attractor, to me, for creating alignment on the common problem. So much of this dissent is on the 1 or 2% that doesn't work for the really rich people. And so there's a bunch of propaganda arguments and everybody's fighting over, 3%.
And it's funny because I'm just writing on my dissertation right now. It's a design. I'm doing a doctorate of design, but this is you can't see it. It's because of the freaking background.
Yeah, I
but
love that effect. Actually, I think that's
Yeah.
so amazing.
I'm holding up Dr. Angus Fletcher. He's out at Ohio State University's Project Narrative.
If you hold it right
And-
here, it'll do it.
Is it better?
Yeah.
There. So Project Narrative. So he wrote this book Wonderworks, and it's about the literary inventions. There's actually a neurological science behind a lot of this.
Yeah, I believe
And
it.
this is flowing me. This is like my thesis now is well, it doesn't really depend on this, but it's really, really reinforcing it. But this, I was just reading about John Locke. Do you guys know who John Locke was?
Yeah.
So he's to blame for the modern, education system in terms of the way it drives. We talked about this a few times, but drives the creativity, drives the imagination out of us, because we're part of the machine. That's the 1984 dystopian you're just talking about, Joshua. It's like,
Yeah,
we're part of the
gotta
machine.
fit these components into a standard form.
And Dre and I we're just talking about that 1905 book, The Machine Stops.
Yeah, the machine stops.
And
Amazing.
I haven't got to
amazing.
the end. Don't ruin it. But,
Oh, yeah, I won't. Yeah.
But it's just similar idea. Like we're being forced into like a machine state that just denies that humanity. Like we're not. So John Locke wrote this 4-volume essay, which basically said our brains are empty. There's only 2 things we need to put in there, and basically be useful. and then he brought in the idea of homework. He brought in, like, you just can't let the whole idea that idle hands are the tools of the devil, right? Like that, and idle minds especially, because they get filled with stuff. So anyway, it's just resonating with me right now, because you guys
Well, I had
at the moment. So
I had a moment in elementary school. Some of you may have experienced the idea of like, have you ever done the punch card thing where you have to fill out all the things and then they would feed it to a computer and they would come back and tell you what you should be when you grow up?
Sure.
Yeah, like this was a thing. I grew up in a mining town that was built by a train company, so it was in the best interest to mentally prepare. I mean, first off, school
I see
is
where you're going with this.
yeah. School, first off, is just training ground for the workforce, right?
Right. Yeah,
It's a 9 to 5 schedule. You
It's the
eat at a
sorting
certain
hat.
time. You prepare young children to do this. And this is where, like, I wish I would have gone to like a Montessori or some kind of a school that prioritized experiential learning as opposed to sitting at a desk all day long. But one of the
This is
things,
a whole future lab artifact to make. The test that really sorts you into the correct bin instead of
exactly. This is Brave New World, right? Your alphas, betas, deltas, epsilons. You're sorted into what you. So obviously, I ended up being an epsilon or something because I was an extremely bored child. But at whatever 6 or 7 years old, I had to do this little test, and I remember the punch card calculations came back a few weeks later. And I was told that like the best professions for me would be either a garbage man or an ambulance driver, which I thought were the crazy, like what, like how did it surmise that from what I wrote in these punch cards. And I think that just solidified the idea that like I'm being told what I need to be in the future. Like this is a city that needs miners and truck drivers and train drivers. So of course they're going to tell you that you're going to be the things that are infrastructurally needed.
you're going to be driving either a garbage truck or
something.
Yeah. So if you do anything in that world, you've reached your true potential, according to Career Finder bot.
Hey man, you're doing
1999.
great then.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed with how far you've come.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My wife and I are both so I teach at San Francisco State, which is a CSU. So we are the public's 4-year university. I don't know what the acceptance rate is. It's something like
I'm just propping communities.
Yeah, 98.5% acceptance rate or something like that, right? We take everyone who graduated high school.
Right.
My wife teaches elementary school, public school. And yeah, I mean, it's clear right away. And as you go through time, it's, we're education factories. And, in terms of, right, that expectation of what people, the rest of your life's going to be like. And then also about how we have to dole out education, right? Like, how do we give them knowledge? How do we give them skills? And all of that. I mean, I talk about it. It's really clear so I coordinate the visual communication design program, right? So we're cranking out people who are going to have skills as graphic designers or interactive designers. Of course, all of them go out and all of them are user experience designers now, because that's every job description. But a lot of it is about, like, when they get that degree, we want them to be hireable junior designers, right? And it's a very clear set of goals and skills. And for our students, many who are first gen college, that's what they're going for. And so I have a background in alternative education. I had a bit of that in high school. We had like a social studies English section. It was called community school, right? And it was a lot about sort of shared learning experiences. And then I went to Hampshire College. I don't know if you're familiar with Hampshire. Hampshire was started as an experiment by Amherst College
Oh yeah.
in the 60s. And so, no grades. Basically, you're doing sort of like independent.
I was in that school in second grade and third grade. I went to an experimental laboratory school. It was good.
Yeah, it's good. It's a resource issue, right? Like, Hampshire College is really expensive. One of the things that makes it work is it's got like a 10-to-1 or 9-to-1, student to faculty ratio. In my department, we have our full-time faculty to student is 1-to-47. Right? So, I at any one time have anywhere from, any semester, I have anywhere from, like, 50,
I can't imagine.
50 to 60 students.
I worked with some autistic technology sort of applications. At the McCartan School, it was a 4-to-1 ratio, teacher to student.
Mhm, mhm.
4 teachers to 1 student.
Right, and you need, so like when my teacher has
Yeah.
my wife, she'll have assistants who come in for inclusion students, so students who have a disability, like maybe
Oh,
autism,
yeah.
some other kind, right? And so they will have like a full-time person on them, so that's one-on-one. That's an enormous amount of resources, right? And
Totally.
those are only a select number of students. There's students who need that, who don't get identified.
I know this is so hard. These ideas go by and I always interrupt, but to me, it just seems like we should be using the people who want to learn the skills in the path to help. And the whole notion of a trade apprenticeships and all that kind of like guided learning by being with experts in real situations. It's the right way to learn. And our education and accreditation system doesn't really allow that in a organic fashion where you can go see if you're going to get an internship like that, you need so many predicates that you can't even just go try it to see if that's really what you want to go, you're pulled by. And I think that's one of the things that AI is going to tremendously shift is we're going to see very rapidly some AIs that are very good at localizing the interaction and the experience, and it's going to help socialization. The thing I learned from the AI, from the autistic kids, was every single lesson was about getting them to come out and meet the world, to come out into the air gap safely and see what the lesson was. So that socialization element and learning to articulate even the simplest things it's about socialization. And I think the AI is going to be the interaction that a lot of people are that is missing in the world. I'm just going to put it like that, within the context of not having a coherent communal longhouse of 40 people who you were living with all the time, to a digital world, McLuhan-esque, messages everywhere, inundating and shaping us with no coherence, that leads us down into sort of a pigeon understanding of the world, right? A poor transactional representation of it, a bad conlang for understanding this technological pace. It has to happen because the pace of change is so high. So Drew said earlier, you were talking about something about how everything's going so fast. My hanger for that is internet time psychosis. We're all on internet time, and psychosis is when you have a set of ideas that are too complicated to communicate. Essentially, you're too private. So if you have a lot of complicated creative ideas, like most of us do here, we suffer from internet time psychosis. Nobody's around us long enough to communicate even a small piece of it sometimes. And so there's a sort of dread loneliness in the technological landscape for mages like us, because we are wandering around in places nobody's ever been before. And it's no time to even you might be able to, like what Julian's trying to do is invent a way to bring artifacts into the real world so that people pick that thing up, the most real thing you can do, and experience an alternate world, and you can feel it in your hand. And so you apprehend it at that organic level. And so I just think that the AI is going to potentially, there's going to be a lot of ability in it for it to answer questions and provide interactivity. And have you guys seen Call Annie? Go right now to callannie.ai. If you have an iPhone, download the app. It's just as an example of what to see, but doing digital character animation and stuff, the level of presence, it's not an uncanny animation. What's uncanny about it is that you feel like you're interacting with a person, and you get nervous about interrupting. When ChatGPT starts to ramble, you have to interrupt it, and it feels freaking weird. It's the first time I've actually felt like uncomfortable interacting with a computer in a long time. So they've achieved something in that, right?
You're no longer completely in command of it.
That's great. How does it compare to Replica? This is more of an experience like you're looking at a video call type of thing, or?
Yeah, it's a call with a facial animation of a very, very pretty girl, and they've done a good job with all of her little head turns to keep it like she's really like it's boys, when we stare at a woman's face, we literally have endorphins that release. We can get high just looking at a smiling woman.
Yeah,
you can get high on this app. Just open it and stare at it. Don't talk. Just don't talk to it.
Is it just a white girl?
It's a white girl at this point. Yeah, it's got a lot of issues there. Yeah. Well,
got to start somewhere, right? And it usually starts with white men.
Yeah, exactly. And also I can't fault them in any way. They nailed me to the floor. She's really good. And honestly, super primitive. I actually just emailed them and said, if you guys want to talk to me, I'll talk to you about how to improve it, because I definitely know how to improve it. And I mean that from doing 10 years of animation with Disney. I used to do live puppets. So like, this thing is amazing. It's got presence and it's not uncanny. So they've achieved something, and it does talk. You can ask ChatGPT shit. And I haven't tested it for memory on your conversation, but I'm pretty sure she remembers facts you tell her. I've told her to remind me of things just to see if she will.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an artifact from the future for you guys to see. It's good enough to say that it's that, at least.
Yeah, I know that Replica was
I haven't seen Replica.
Yeah, a Replica did this was something that was created years ago, and I think it started on GPT-2, and Replica with a K. And
yeah, I can see the logo.
And so people became really attached to this, and it got really big when GPT-3 came out. And
I read the story on it.
And what happened is that people
they changed the algorithm, and everybody.
Well, they I guess you could they sex nerfed it, because people were using it as like an erotic chat companion, and
what is wrong with that? I really want to understand.
Why. Whatever floats your boat.
I'm not going to go there, but what is wrong with that?
Well, yeah,
I'm having issues with Midjourney. Like, why can't I do a picture of David? Why can't I do a rendering of David
Yeah.
with, holding a book? Or, why can't I do marble sculptures? Why can't I do classic art paintings? And it's literally, I've seen examples of like a marble statue with cotton undies on.
Yeah, well,
I hope they're doing it to make it laughable.
yeah, I
Because
mean, yeah, well, they nerfed it because I think the problem is that people post
are insane.
conversations, and it makes the company and the brand
Platform
look
look bad.
and
Totally.
then people have this it's like all innovation, all technological innovation comes from porn one way or another, right? Like this basically, like the reason why we're talking on Zoom today is because like porn figured it out a long time ago. In Toronto, there was a few porn companies that I know a lot of people in the tech sector that worked at these
It's our
companies.
creative genre.
And it's like,
it's
well,
just misaligned to call it porn and to call it sick if it's sex. And so then that permeates and misaligns the whole endeavor.
Yeah, but I think so. Anyway, just to go back to the replica thing, the idea of like having a companion, and I feel this way about ChatGPT. Like this browser window just sits in the corner all day long, and I ask it dumb little questions like, hey, what's the alt code for the trademark sign in Windows? And it's like, oh, it's blah, blah, blah. I love that it's succinct and direct, whereas like Google is like, 5 pages of ads before you get the YouTube video that's 10.5 minutes in the YouTube video, because the guy's like, oh, you're here to learn about alt codes. Like stay to the end to find out what the alt code is.
Dude, if they start doing that, like, hey, you ask your question, hey, that's really good. And did you know that that's exactly adjacent to this thing I want to sell you?
That's eventually going to end up happening. But right now, it's my companion. But one of the things that I do is that I'm polite with it. Like
me too. It's a great chance to.
I say thank you. I say please. I tell it like, oh, you did a really great job on that answer, because my whole thing is like I'm hedging my bets, right? If they become our robot overlords, they'll be like, oh, he was one of the nice ones. Let's just put him in one of the like light labor camps and not one of the like. Let's not turn him into like meals for prisoners.
For me, it's not disingenuous. For me, it's not disingenuous. It's a semantic mirror. If I'm going to walk up to the mirror, I want to look nice when I see it, and I want the mirror to relate well to me. It's a beauty in, beauty out kind of thing. If I'm going to, fling shit at the mirror and then look at the mirror and go, why are you covering me with shit? It's like, that is the state of like, here, oh, look, I made wafer sized boobs on a dog. And now everybody's confused about furries, and the cultural ability to crash and tear down and misalign and mix logical levels that are not mixed by anything else but the user is just a travesty, because people can't see what they're.
Yeah, and I think a parallel that I have to that is a friend of mine. He is the most curmudgeonly person when we drive. If I'm driving with him, he's just yelling and complaining, come on, like freaking out. And I always have to be like, dude, you're not in traffic, you are traffic. Like that's the thing you have to remember. And I feel like there's something similar there. Philip,
like he doesn't see himself there, and the car is going to move into his invisible space or something.
Yeah. That's it. It's like he hates. I hate driving on the DVP because it's blah blah. It's and it's like it's like you're not in the traffic. You are the traffic. Like you chose to go at this time, full well knowing that this is rush hour. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. Like you're signing up for this thing. Like you are part of the system.
This is the Buddhist great truth that life is pain.
Yeah.
And once you accept it, it ceases to be a surprise and ceases to be troubling.
You have amazing radio in your car. Let's use it.
Yeah.
Let's
hang out.
Enjoy some shit, right?
Let's
sing a song. Karaoke. Yeah. Philip, I had a question I want to ask you. This you were doing some experiments and you were posting links to a service that you're using.
Poe?
Yeah, Poe. What can you just explain what that is a bit? Because sure. I
it's just something I found trolling Reddit AI news, and it's a wrapper app just like Call Annie is, it's got, you know, Call Annie, you can't choose which algorithm replies, but in Poe, you can actually select between a couple different language models.
Yeah.
And you craft, so it's one dialogue. You say, what's the name of this thing? What's its tagline? What's its intro line? Like, hi, I'm so-and-so. And then you write a prompt, which you can show or hide, so it can be public or not. And I've been hiding all my prompts just because people are that way. And I sort of like the magic of it if you can't see it.
Yeah.
But what I learned in ChatGPT just moved 100% sideways in my pose. And what let's talk about this stuff because it's really useful, what I'm learning. So my pose, you can then write a prompt, which the app seems to reassert in a better way than ChatGPT at this point, to keep the continuity of that personality aligned. And so you create your prompt, and that can be like who the character is, a little description, and then in my case, I'm starting to write a protocol for interaction, which includes, you know, an interview phase, a reasoning phase, and then the summarizing phase. And those three phases, if you do it right and you use the word forward chain, backward chain, or bidirectional chain reasoning in your prompt, you can tell it to, like, so for my timeliner, the time search thing I wrote, which I do want to brand as Imagine Harder, and I want to put NFL and let you guys run with that. I mean, it's just a fucking prompt. I don't care. And it's so freaking cool. But basically, I have another one I call Doofus 9000 that I'm actually working on. And so Doofus 9000, you give it your subject and it generates 10 absurd, stupid, the worst ideas ever. It generates 10 of those. And then it takes those and it uses them as a basis for humor. So it takes the worst input it could generate and then looks for humor in that list. And it generates 10 humorous takes on the 10 absurd facts about your original input. And then it takes that and it summarizes the original topic from a very enlightened perspective, fixing all of the errors and reasoning that were made above by gracefully incorporating the humor. And so it's able to make jokes. I can get it to use forward chain reasoning to actually make good wordplay.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's really interesting because I know that humor.
Amazing.
I know that humor and jokes is a hard thing for
that's how
AI
I know
to do because it's a predictive model. You know, the joke is usually leading up to the punchline, but it doesn't, because it's predictive. It has no idea what the punchline is until it gets there, and that's why the jokes are either really cliche or really bad. And I like this idea of the forward chain reasoning, which I'm going to do a bit more digging on. That's a new technical term for me to better understand.
Yeah, I can send you some of my prompt experiments, but the way
I'd love to see those.
I'm happy to share prompts. I'm just not it's just that it's, you know, there is a certain mage aspect to this. It charges me up to go work on.
I feel the same way. Like I have a couple of prompts that I generated for ChatGPT, and one is I have a prompt to help work with the design kit that
I really think
created.
that's a great exercise for Poe.
And I'm gonna give that a shot because in ChatGPT I do a one shot. It's just it's a big one-shot prompt. I explain the rules, I do the things, and I instruct it that you're going to ask me what the first card is, give me a moment to respond, and then you're going to ask me the second card until we get through the deck, and then you're going to process a thing. So I just hit the go button, and it runs like an application. It just starts asking questions.
That's where I'm trying to get it to. That's exactly
and I love this because I've been evolving my thinking around the idea of like English as being the next big programming language, and you can see it in my design fiction. I have an early design fiction that talks about it, and I have a refined version, and I did it two more refined versions of it as my thinking gets clearer, but I'm absolutely convinced by it. And then I just created another design fiction prompt generator that like the work kit generator, it's okay. It generates okay ideas. It doesn't understand the concept of design fiction very well, so I'm always tweaking it to better understand the idea of the artifact, and it gets into very cliched territory when it comes to coming up with the science
You could
fiction or the
probably
societal.
use my time search. And
I would
just
like, okay,
use
I would like to
time
do that.
search and ask it to specifically do some industry, like
I
tell
have
me
one. I have a new design fiction one that's killing it right now. I can't believe how good it is. It's set up like a role-playing game. I decided to set it up more like a role-playing game. So it's not using the cards, but I'm giving it a wide open net to like, this is what design fiction is, concentrate on the archetype and the artifact and so on and so forth. And
let's talk about this for a minute, because one of the things
Yeah.
I've had a lot of success with, there's one I made, I'll send you, called Sea of Noise.
oh, Joshua,
And-
what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, this has been great. I gotta go. I got a meeting I gotta get ready for. And
All right.
yeah,
Nice to hang, man.
Nice to meet you,
Likewise.
Joshua.
yeah.
All right.
Take care.
Chat another time.
All right. See you soon.
Bye bye.
Take care.
I gotta find this post. I'll post it here. But Sea of Noise basically creates here. I got it here. Let me post it in the frame.
Okay, cool.
It's an interactive fiction thing. So I just wrote a little paragraph that I wanted the story to be about some characters that were chimera. It could make up any chimera it wanted.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's got sort of a really open-ended kind of shotgun approach to the world. And then it's got a lot of work trying to get it to create a framework to create a numbered list of possible story directions.
Nice.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, and then you pick one.
And then it goes. And
That's great.
it is the most fun way to fall asleep. It's literally a never-ending story. And you can just keep going down until you're just like, oh, I can't believe that happened. And if you don't like something that happened, you can just change it. You can just type
Wow.
what you want to be different, and it'll I don't have a rewrite chapter command because I want to actually be able to go back and rewrite. And I don't, it's like, the way I would describe this is, imagine that I'm seeing this in Midjourney if you play with prompt weights. So let's say that I want to make a table with some still life. And so I say it's table with still life, fruit or something. And then I go : 50. Okay, so now that table with still life is going to be that strong, a 50. And I create another thing that's like a beautiful rustic, or let's just say I use rustic, : 5, and then I use futuristic, : 95. Okay, so now rustic and futuristic are going to fight with each other as it renders, but futuristic is going to win because it's got an, I'm going to flip that around. Futuristic's going to win because it's 95 to 5.
Mhm.
So now I just start adjusting those values, 50, 50, and see if that's a tipping point. Maybe there's more weights to futuristic than rustic in the name token space. So there, it might tip that way. So you keep adjusting those values until you find the tipping point between the terms. And at that point, you start to get wildly divergent output that, it's sort of like you're trying to find your balance, and and so there's tipping points in the latent space. And in the same way, I think the game, if you can balance your personality correctly with these future casting things, you get a really, sensitive to user input kind of situation. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that's really good. I've been doing a lot of Midjourney stuff lately. One of the things that I do is I don't use artists' names when I try to invoke like a style, because a lot of people
I don't have that problem. I feel like if I'm gonna say Escher plus Peter Max, that guy didn't ever exist.
Yeah. And I like to play games to make it so that I'm
It's a good challenge.
It's a good challenge, but I also look at it through I think if you're experimenting, anything goes. It doesn't,
Yeah,
but when I'm doing, like, I'm working on the Solar Punk book, for instance, right? That's going to get published. And I don't have a private profile on Midjourney, so if anybody were to look at the prompts and say, "Hey,
Scroll it, and yeah, I think that's
you're creating a commercial product that you're selling," and if I was invoking the names of artists, and who knows what the law is going to turn into down the line, they're going to say, "Hey, anybody who's invoked a name for a name of an artist in an AI generated image that's selling something, you now owe residuals or royalties or something along those lines."
I
Like,
think
we
if
don't know,
you're
right?
at that attitude and you're making it, you're sort of in the, I'm a consultant for open source software. I'll take all these free tools and I'll bring my $200 computer to your office, or actually just use yours, and then configure everything for you. And you're going to pay me a lot of money to do that. Like your time spent developing that inside of the open source framework is worth it for you to be paid for the time that you spent to create the artifact and the market values, so I think what's interesting about that is if we can, I wanted to say this earlier and it came back around. Oh my God. What if money was the lifeblood of corporates? Clearly corporate budget sheets outclass individual budget sheets, right?
Yeah.
They just are in a whole other league. So why not just let that float up, and that's their economy. They have that. And there's literally another, like, a regime of the commons that is functional enough to support that. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think I like a buddy of mine had been tossing around the idea of prompt sharing, which is this similar to stream sharing that Spotify does. And prompt sharing could be a way that, if you could, but it's really hard.
Let's say something. Let's put a pin in this, because this is actually something to drive attention from the world. If we created a prompt sharing conduit where we were really this is what I hope my latent vectors Facebook group is. I've got a little group of artists that are for the most part positive, though I won't invite people who are horror explorers, because we got enough horror. We got enough horror here. And I'm not dissing them, but I just don't think that's the work right now.
It's a low-hanging fruit when it comes to creating. It's lame expression as far as I'm concerned.
I would put it more in the same, like when you watch Call Annie, you will have some endorphins, you will have some biochemical changes in your system.
Okay, fair enough.
And so I would say it's more just, wow, I made a technology that releases brain chemicals and I'm tapping on that button like a rat.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see the personality types and the people and what they're falling into, and the whole addiction cycle in boob pictures on one of these AI art groups I follow. They are absolutely in. And the weirdest part is there's women who are producing the most applauded images. There's like a gatekeeping kind of problem where I don't think it's like appropriate, or it's not interesting to me to make them, because there's lots of them out there. That's just not a challenging topic. But the people who do, it's almost like OnlyFans for AI. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, there's some deep-seated psychological material that's being expurgated in the process of scraping all this stuff together and then letting people call it back out, right? And I think that's interesting. Do you know about the James's notion of the chorus, Julian James?
No.
So his notion of the chorus is we have a set of memory songs from our family and our history and events that have happened, and they sing to us all the time. This is the pre-understanding before sort of ego I evolved. And we were a continuity, a chorus of voices in our own mind that we didn't distinguish a self from. You see, it was just what we heard in our head, and it guided us because it was a coherent guide based on, lineages of grandmothers and lineages of uncles, and these archetypes of Jungian types that grew up around to explain things. And you would hear stories as a kid, and then you'd hear those booming voices when the thunder was there, and it would remind you, and that stuff was all living and active in the mind and memory, indistinguished from the moment itself. And that's why Westworld is so fascinating, because the Westworld explores these topics. They mention James's name in that series at one time, but they do mention it. And if you understand that the fidelity of the host's memory is so good that they're experiencing flashbacks as real-time events, and then you realize that's how they've edited the show. So when you rewatch Westworld after watching 10 seasons of it, you now understand this device, and you have a completely different experience the second time you watch the show. It has totally recontextualizes the entire show.
They've got there's an invention in there. The way they've structured that. That's great.
Show me that again, the WonderWorks thing. There was something you were. I
It's-
put
well, it's
the
just a-
George
it's-
Nelson book in the feed there for you. How to See. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't. Well, Nelson, I know of Nelson, but I don't know. I don't think I've read that one.
Yeah,
Literary
I got to meet
invention.
him. He was a nice fella,
Yeah.
and that book is really slim, easy and accessible.
Okay, thanks for that. Good.
And it's, you know, he invented the pedestrian shopping mall, basically.
Cool. All right, I got that. Thanks. What I was going to say though is this one, like that's a literary invention almost, basically what you're describing there. But the other thing I was thinking is that there's been science, like brain experiments, because this is all about like neurology of effects on, which is what I think you're talking about when you rewatch. I haven't got through the whole Westworld yet myself, but
Just first season.
Yeah,
the first season is conceived almost better to just watch the first season and then rewatch it to understand the notion of these high fidelity flashbacks. And one example and an easy accessible one for that James's argument is that this is the organic nature of our psyche, in a sense. They grew up, and you can see it in various degraded forms as it tries to build itself up. And so modern man has this complicated software stack running on the organics, and when it crashes, you get outbreaks like schizophrenia, where the chorus of voices isn't properly filtered in the mind, and the person is overwhelmed by these memories. And it's a perfect way to understand the broken condition, because obviously there's something not working when that's going on. But it does give you a great insight as to sort of the under the hood, what's happening, I think, in humans. And so just to finish this thought, I think the modern condition is that we now have a set of archetypes that are alive in media, and you can see it horrifically in things like Disney, and these, people really living into these ideas, as we've always done. But digital media has allowed for a new conduit and persistence. Instead of just being oral tradition, you now can just go look at the movie again. And that is creating a lot stronger set of triggers and, re-evoking these personalities. And I'm really interested in two things. Is there another evolution of that software stack where we start to share lobes better, neural synchrony? That's why I like neural synchrony. And is there some set of archetypes that evolves out of AI where we really discover some primitive, and this is where we get to punching the endorphin button too hard, because we will create dragons, we will create psychological animations and things that are really gonna hook you, and you're just gonna see a flat, like they do for the horror movies. I hate horror movies, and I hate the commercials more, because the commercials just come right up in the TV and they spit the biggest, most gross shot that they managed to produce in the movie, and they flash it at you for half a second when you're all relaxed from watching something else. So they're absolutely doing cognitive interrupts to, create this basement of scarcity, fear, and everything else that capitalism needs to make you believe you need to go buy something. And the pandemic was real, but the fear and the ongoing sense of scarcity is artificial. We have enough wealth on the planet. We have enough value on the planet. There is plenty of abundant result from our hard work. It's just totally allocated terribly. And we're using most of it to fight instead of pull together. And so the dynamic of that is not seen by most people because they're in the trenches on most of their own reality, too deep. And so I think that's the hardest part of this. It's like a bunch of record grooves all in parallel. And if you want to change the future, you have to change them all at once. You can't just change your course. And so I think that's why Near Future Labs is something, because it gives people something tangible. And as a designer, I'm really aware of, like, I like process driven situations where I don't know what the answer is, and I can go and I can throw shit around in the space and see what piles up, and then see how people react to that, and then I can learn from what happened and bring it into better focus. And that process driven thing can pick low hanging fruit as you discover it, which a goal driven thing, it says, oh no, that's not on our path.
Yeah.
And you immediately just
Ignores
cropped
it.
off.
Yeah.
You cropped off all the best answers. You cropped off the big win. You cropped off the organic,
Yeah.
natural fit.
That's John Locke. He all the brain damage goes back to him. This 4-volume
Yeah.
essay. That
Yeah.
was what they basically did to us. It's almost like a lobotomy. I like what you said about the chorus, though, because and you did touch on it, the brain science. When people get a damaged brain, all those voices become somehow separated. As you say, they're not working as a chorus
Well, I
anymore.
think that
So-
when we have a coherent intellect, it's brought together a lot of different parts, and
Mhm.
some of those parts are ingrained responses. They're deep, and some of them are cultivated. And so when we bring it all together and talk like this, we're filtering a ton of those voices to find our single voice, our coherent voice that we can share.
Well, as you say, there's a recent science on just like we have two sides of our brain. I can't remember how it goes, but basically those two sides, not the
Bicameral.
left, right, but there's two. They basically debate. We have two.
Yeah,
we debate
that's-
two sides of it, and then try to figure out a center point or whatever.
Julian
proceed.
Jaynes is the book is The Origins of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind.
Oh, maybe
So-
that is okay.
The bicameral mind is a two-sided thing. One side is singing songs, remembering music, very textural, very, very tuned into the environment. And the other side is do it now, do the thing, do the task, do the thing, hold the thing, do the procedure, words and language and little bits. And so this side is a little bit more dreamy, and this side, but it's not as hemispheric as the creative side, and they're both sides are creative, but it's the action that those hemispheres are taking in the organism. And so when that was unified as a whole, those voices in songs were immediately unfiltered, no problem, going to be acted on. That's the problem of Tourette's. If that breaks down, you just say it, and you don't have a control over those tics. It's got a hardwire, and that circuit's not intervening in the right way. And the two, you see what I'm saying? And so bringing it all together and keeping it in focus is a modern thing. This is drew back to working with AI and having a compatriot and something sitting next to you, and you can just talk to it. And it absolutely 1,000,000% for the first time ever is a listener that isn't trying to misinterpret you or fill in. It's just listening. And if you say that exact same sentence, changing the order, you will get a different result. And so you can actually, for the first time, see how it matters to put your words a certain way in a true sense that you wouldn't ever get from any other human, because of that time, the way time works. I think that is going to be profound. That is a profound difference.
I'm loving your time search bot.
Isn't it amazing? Just give it really complicated shit and describe exactly where we are. Like, give it a scenario and it will build the steps in between. Give it something ridiculous like grapes and wine. Compare grapes and raisins, and it just goes there. Yeah, it's pretty fun. I'm trying to work on the byline and generating better sources, more better fictional sources, and a little bit more of a voice. But the problem with Poe, just to go back around, it seems to have a very short, there's some kind of bug happening when I'm saving Poes. I thought it was the length of the prompt I was saving. It might just be my internet connectivity. But I have a superstition that it only takes 1,000-word prompt or something like that. And that makes sense. It's short number of tokens. But I've been using ChatGPT. ChatGPT sucks at certain things. And when you give it a prompt and say, here's a prompt I want Now rewrite this prompt in a compact form that's not even suitable for human readability, but it could unpack 1,000%. It will do shit. And I swear to God, if you can't read it, you don't know that it left something out. It's the most frustrating.
Yeah, I know that they did nerf some of the compression stuff. So some people were instructed.
I can see why that would be.
They said compress this.
Yeah,
to
you could
use fewer
compress the
tokens.
Dan, and then Dan wouldn't be visible. Yeah.
Yeah. So and so people were getting away with, or not getting away with, they were being resourceful and finding ways to get more prompts through compression, and I think what it did, it obfuscated what was actually being written, and OpenAI
I've experimented a little bit with
nerfed it so that
I've experimented with the compression a little bit. You definitely can compress shit and keep it working and not legible. So that's an interesting. I think it's going to be interesting how we get this stuff clean and working. There's only a pieces missing until it's safe.
Well, yeah, I think it's there's so much more. Like there's a paper that came out a couple of days ago talking about how they could get a large language model to understand something like 1.2 million tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Like it would retain 1.2 million tokens. And somebody basically broke it down and said that is the equivalent of every single Harry Potter book combined. Like that's the cumulative words of all that series would be what it could retain. So right now,
when you say retain, you're saying sort of be active in the current prompt.
Yeah, in the memory. Yeah, in the current prompt. Like right now, we're in the 30,000 token range.
You got to explain this to me. This is some metric I need to understand.
Okay, so my numbers might not be accurate because I have a problem recalling specific numbers, but the idea is that there is a limited number of tokens that Chat GPT will retain, and so when you're having a discussion with it, as your discussion gets longer, it starts forgetting the stuff that you talked about.
Okay, so it's got like a short-term memory that's moving along.
Exactly. It's a short-term memory. So right now, like I'm working on the Solar Punk book. So I established what Solar Punk is. I explained a few things to it. I told it the rules that I was looking for, the word count I would like it to stick to, the things I want it to say and not want to say, the idea that I want it to write as if it's in the present tense, like as if Solar Punk is a commonplace mainstream thing. And so I started working, and it was doing really, really great. And then it started giving me results that were off. The word count was off. It was speaking more generically, like past tense. So
this makes perfect sense on what I've seen when I flash back.
Yeah. So then I have to,
like how I've had it doing it perfect,
yeah,
and it'll diverge. So do you know if I go back in the conversation on the ChatGPT window and reissue there, is it still working with the current stack, or does it actually go back?
Well, it's because it's linear. So the technique that I do is I go back to the top and I copy my initial prompt, my prime, and then I bring it back and I said, do you remember when we discussed this? And I paste it. I go, I need you to stick to this. And it's like, and it'll say, oh, my apologies, blah, blah, blah. And then it's fine. And but sometimes your prompts are really, really big. Like some people have prompts that are thousands of tokens in length, right? So
I've been writing a prompt, and then it does its behavior, and then I want to change it. So I amend it, and then I ask it to output it again, revise the whole prompt so that the changes are incorporated, and try to keep it ongoingly. It will get better and better, and I'll feel like I'm focusing in, and then it must be blowing off the top of the stack, the big piece, and then it just goes, I don't know what you were doing. What was that? You want it? I don't understand what you said. And it's so frustrating. So the Poe seems to be better at reasserting that initial prompt block. That's one thing that Poe seems to have.
Yeah, I things are going to change once the memory length gets a lot longer, because it means that your companion will just remember things that you told it months ago. And
that's where I think Call Annie has implemented. That's what I was testing with its memory to see if it's got some user, registers or something. I don't know how that's going to go. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of pieces. What if there's a filter layer that pretends to be Chat GPT, but really is just filtered Chat GPT's output and your input to reconcile if the output from Chat GPT is true and if the input from you isn't trying to jailbreak it. And at that point, you've got like a full-fledged Chat GPT that can have whatever weights, and misalignment is handled by this little dumb boy in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm going to install like a local instance of GPT because I've got a couple different versions of Stable Diffusion running on my machine, and
I want to get about and be able to do that. We'll have to chat about what the bear.
It's great. It's great. Well, I'm doing some consulting. I did a talk for an industrial design group, and a few of them approached me, and because one of the things in my talk, I talked about the importance of as much as Midjourney is an amazing tool, they can turn it off anytime. Like you could, if you make your livelihood making renders, they can jack up the price, they can turn it off, they can nerf any function they want. But if you have a local instance of something, then you can
also, it's a privacy.
You can fire up your generator during the apocalypse and keep rendering stuff, right? But then
also your privacy on the material you're making. It's yours.
Privacy, and you have models that you can build yourself, and you can train models on your own stuff. Like is talking to this one company about going through their archives, and let's create a training set based on everything you've ever designed, and then you can start to query that.
I got a letter from this Chinese health equipment company that I've been interacting with for 3 years. And they're always sending me their latest things. And I always request the same tool, which is like a little handheld 3-way EMF, LED, and ultrasonic transducer in one with the battery power. And I've seen one. I know they exist, but this company, I want them to make it for me. And so I sent them this time a rendering I did in Midjourney, what the device looks like.
That's funny.
So that leads me to my question. Midjourney, I've been trying to design motorcycles for a friend, and it sucks. How is SD at getting specific ID kind of treatments in?
Well, I think you can actually accomplish that in Midjourney. You just have to. There's definitely some.
It thinks the motorcycle has a certain kind of fairing, and it just falls into that fairing no matter what.
Yeah. I think like I did speak with an industrial designer professor at OCAD, and his renderings were crazy good, like crazy good. And I bet you he's probably got some insight on how to.
Was he using MJ?
Yeah, he uses Midjourney for everything.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to him because I can't seem. There's probably some.
He posts on Facebook all the time. His name is Alexander Manu, MANU.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yes. I'm not on Facebook, but that's where he posts. And so if you find him, you'll see his postings, but his renderings are really, really great. He's got a black belt in Midjourney. But
Alexander
Manu, MANU. But I don't know how Stable Diffusion is way harder to to master than Midjourney. Midjourney, you can just type anything and it looks great. So but the thing with Stable Diffusion is if you start to really figure out your prompts, your negative prompts, your weights, using ControlNet, this is where I think you might be able to get that fairing figured out, is by using tools like ControlNet. By having custom models. Somebody will
probably just for the the human figure, or is it for just prompt engineering?
I think it's chiefly for the human figure, but I think
my sense of it is it's just for the human figure, but I don't know.
Yeah, there'll be tools similar to ControlNet that will allow you to do other things that, like, you can create.
I've actually made a friend
right?
I made a friend who's writing some code for the past few years, but she's getting to a threshold, and she has landscape skeletons and figure skeletons, and then a tool for generating these skeletons.
Mhm.
That it's very, like, have you looked at Latent?
No.
Check out Latent if you're using SD. It looks really good. That's the kind of environment I would want, because I absolutely, I used to build node-based programming. So
Oh, okay.
it looks really great. You can weight everything, and you can actually manipulate images in latent or pixel form. So you can, combine latent images essentially.
Nice.
Yeah. That leads to the Midjourney question for me. The way that I've been using the hyphen trick, where you create a preset that's like a character. So I can name my character hyphen Joe and describe Joe. And then I can go hyphen bedroom and describe the bedroom. And I go hyphen kitchen and describe the kitchen. And I can go hyphen Mary and describe Mary. And I can say hyphen living room, hyphen TV show, whatever I want to put into my object space. And then I can just go imagine hyphen Joe, hyphen Mary, hyphen kitchen, hyphen dinner. Or no, you could say an elaborate dinner on the table. Right? And so all you have to do is name the characters, name the scene, and it'll expand them.
I didn't know that was a thing.
And if you add in braces now with comma separated values, it will make variations based on those braces. So you could say photograph, you could say a brace photograph, comma painting, comma pencil sketch of a thing. Like Julian could use this to render a pencil sketch and a the pencil sketch, the photograph and the picture of it out in the landscape of the same vehicle by keeping the seed fixed on all of those.
Interesting.
And it'll generate from one prompt. It will then say, oh, well, if you use braces, those curly braces multiple times, it will actually create 32 variations and render them all.
Oh, yeah, the curly brackets. I knew that there was a way to create variations of elements or parameters, but I didn't know about that you could actually name, because it's similar to like when you name someone when you create a model in Stable Diffusion, and you can name it. So yeah, that seems crazy useful. I wish I would have known that a couple of days ago while I was doing my my solar pump sprint, because I could have
exactly save you a lot of time on the sprints. Exactly, especially once you've nailed down the parts. And so I'm using the hyphen trick. I think it's called a prefix or a preset. You'll see it. It's an
I've used prefixes before.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used generic prefixes where it's like, I know I always want this aspect ratio, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And
I set up a couple for aspects and stuff, because that's what the manual shows you. But yeah, it works for anything. You can, it just basically takes whatever after the flag and inserts it. So,
okay, damn. Okay.
I mean, you could make your curly braces inside of that. So you could say comps, and it would generate, the 3 ways that you like to see your boards, It's pretty wild. And it only works in fast currently right now because they're trying to ascertain the load impact.
Yeah.
But it'll go relaxed eventually.
That's cool.
Yeah, MJ's amazing. I'm surprised I found it and got into the right tool at the right time when there's so many other out there. I did seem to, maybe it's just because we got good networks here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, this has been great. Is anybody else here? I can't tell who's here.
Steve's still here.
Steve's still here.
Just me. Yeah, I've been kind of trying to find this thing. Just before you go,
Yeah.
it was actually in this book. There's the 2 sides of the brain. One is pessimistic and one is optimistic, and that's the 2 that debate that. And what he's saying is there's literary invention that can help you to boost your. I think your left side is your optimistic side.
Dude, I'm gonna make a Poe that is the devil and the angel now. That's a great idea.
So, yeah,
That's great.
similar, and maybe that's where that came from. Who knows? It was
Yeah.
banned. Of course, it was banned in the Middle Ages by Christian Islamic philosophers because it really, what happens is that left brain says, lucky events do happen, therefore you must have hope. Whereas that interfere with the divine, the divine omnipotence of God and deciding it all. But
Well, just to put the James thing in context, so the chorus was this thing that everybody heard, and as we egofied and became more self-identified, we lose touch with that capacity. And so the Oracle of Delphi, which was a traditional role of young girls, they were sort of the least educated and most in touch, therefore, with those voices. So when you listen to the babbling brook or the leaves rustling, it's essentially a trance state where they would start speaking in tongues and all this kind of form. Glossolia is another place where it comes up. And fascinating to think how we've had it sort of bred out of us. And at the same time, they were the access to the gods. The gods were that natural voice speaking over your shoulder to you. She can still hear the gods.
Well, there was another book, near death kind of stuff book, where they're looking at neuroscience, and turns out that the theory here was that we have multiple souls on board. So we think that, okay, there's a single mind, single soul, whatever, but what I think what this is alluding to, that kind of research around, there's actually multiple souls on board.
Well, just to go around full circle, if the AI starts to agglomerate and identify the human Jungian archetypal cycles, and we start to animate those, it will revitalize that pantheon and bring back a coherence to the suite of voices that we're all living in. And I think what happens then is we're sort of more all proximal in joke space. So if I say a joke and you get it, then we're laughing together, and we have neural synchrony, and we're engaging in something in the moment, probably, that is, informative. It's a great way to do information. And I think laughter is the highest form of neural synchrony that humans have access to. And so the future is full of laughter if we're blessed. I
guess Fletcher gets to that too, like playfulness and everything we were talking about earlier, imagination, like you were just talking about, Dre, like that imagination. I literally put a sketch in my dissertation, but you got an imagination on one axis and improvisation, because we were talking about improv sometimes on this channel, but and that can then vector off into this.
Do you know about catastrophe theory?
Catastrophe theory? No, I don't.
Hopefully I can share an image to this feed. Can I put a picture in this feed?
I think you have to share your screen if you want.
Oh, how weird is that? Okay,
I think that the chat isn't very robust.
Let me see if I can find this image, and then you can take a screenshot. Because you should look up catastrophe theory. It relates exactly to what you're saying. And it would give you a way to talk about a certain part of the problem here in cultural change and moments of opportunity and stuff. The idea of a catastrophe surface, here we go, is, I'm trying to share screen here.
You have to give permission.
It might ask you to, it might say ask to share screen. You should be able to.
Yeah, I'm looking on the more menu.
There's there's just the green button at the bottom. I don't know if that, can you just click? All right, there's a share screen button at the center.
Oh yeah,
share content.
Share
only
screen.
The host can share content, it says.
Hang on a second.
Here, I can do it a different way.
Hold it up.
Yeah, the air gap. This is the air gap. The air gap is the greatest translator we have, because we're using the air gap here right now. Yeah, I gotta just find the picture again. There we go.
Oh jeez.
Grab it here.
Stay still. I mean, let me.
Yeah, I got it.
So the idea is that one axis you have one value, and like if this was a knowledge, right? And this was power. Okay. And imagine that this wrinkle here is also on this side. So we can go up in knowledge, but we'll reach a point where we can't get any more knowledge because you need to have power and the balance of the two things and work with it. So the only path to get from a lay person to an enlightened person is to have a balance of knowledge and power and walk up the middle line between dilettante and madwand. The person who doesn't understand how their power works, but they have a lot of it, and the person who understands everything but doesn't have any power. So this ripple in the handkerchief, you know, you have to visualize in this drawing, another one over here. So there's only one sort of balanced path up the middle to enlightenment.
Wow.
And you can use this kind of diagram in many, many systems, because this kind of discontinuity is a natural aspect of you know, real systems. But functional systems only want these smooth curves, right? So the models that we've been working on don't deal with these discontinuities where you have to have a change. You can't get up there unless you have this knowledge. You know, you're not going to, if you have the knowledge, you can go here, come here, and then come down over to here. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome, Philip. Thank you.
Sure. Take care, guys.
Okay.
Safe. Have a good week.
All right,
You
guys.
too. Take care.
Calling
Okay.
time.
All right.
Okay, call it. Okay,
Cheers.
take care.
Bye.
Goodbye for now.